WordPress is a complex system with a lot of moving parts and pieces working together. We have HTML, CSS, and possibly JavaScript for the front end of the website. We have the database, which is where all of the information is stored. We have the server, which is where all the files are stored. But perhaps most importantly, we have PHP, the programming language that makes WordPress tick. Without PHP, we would not be able to talk to the database. We would not be able to send information to HTML and CSS for the front end, and we wouldn't be able to interact with the server in any useful way. So what is PHP and how does it work? PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Processor. It's a programming language like JavaScript, as opposed to HTML, which is a markup language. The main difference is that HTML structures data on a page. PHP allows you to apply logic and perform interactive tasks based on a set of criteria. PHP is a server-side language, which means our server, or remote computer, does all of the work and then sends the end result to our browsers. You can imagine the process like a translator. The server translates PHP, a language our browsers don't understand, into HTML, a language our browser can understand. Conversely, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are all client-side languages, meaning that our computers, specifically our web browsers, do all the processing. As an example, in PHP, the code would look like what you see on the screen now. You see we have an opening PHP tag, we have the word echo, and we have 1+1 with a semicolon and a closing PHP tag. That's what we see as PHP code. However, what the browser would see is just the number 2. Because of this, you can't develop PHP on just any computer. The computer needs to be able to understand PHP, much like you can't speak Italian to someone unless they also speak Italian. You can accomplish this one of 2 ways. You can purchase hosting and work on a server that understands PHP, or you can set up a local development environment. I usually recommend both. In the next section, we will set up our local development environment. For now, you can write some simple PHP programs using the website PHP Tester at phptester.net. Since PHP has the ability to use server resources, it's often used to do heavy-duty work for websites. Pull in information from a database, allow users to log into secure areas, run calculations, and display dynamic data. Let's take a look at some PHP basics. Every PHP program begins with an opening PHP tag, and it ends with a closing PHP tag, and you can see them on the screen right now. This tells the server to process everything between these tags. PHP acts as an extension or a companion to HTML. It enables HTML to do things it can't do on its own, interactive tasks. Where HTML strictly handles the markup of a page, that is, the description of what each element is and a basic notion of how it should look, PHP generates dynamic data for a web page to display. PHP code and HTML markup can reside together in a single file on your server. For example, here is some plain HTML. You can see we have the HTML tags, the head and body tags, and then we have a paragraph tag that says this is HTML inside of it. That's just plain HTML. You can write the same script using PHP by adding our PHP tags within the HTML. Here, we will use a basic echo or print statement. So you can see that our HTML looks almost exactly the same, except for the paragraph that has this is HTML in it. Here, we have the opening and closing PHP tags, we have the word echo, and we have this is HTML in quotes. WordPress uses this convention heavily to pull information from a database, determine when a user is logged in, process forms, and a lot more. On top of the opening and closing PHP tags, there are a few other important conventions to know. All PHP files must end in .php. Statements, or commands, in PHP always end with a semicolon. And you can add comments or non-functional text using 2 forward slashes or a forward slash and an asterisk at the beginning and then an asterisk and a backslash at the end. One more note before we get into the fun stuff. My recommended workflow is to use a text editor like Atom to edit files and then upload them to your server using an FTP program. There are more advanced methods, but this is sufficient starting out. Like I said earlier, we'll be setting up a local environment in the next section. Throughout this section, phptester.net is sufficient. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next lesson.